They said I didn't belong in the family legacy. That I was support, not succession. But the moment I saw the bronze statue they had commissioned for the gala, I realized my erasure was no longer subtle. It was carved in metal. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I'm Iris, 33 years old, a biomedical engineer. And this is the story of how I went from the family's shadow to their greatest threat. The statue stood in my father's study, gleaming under the spotlight. My father, Henri, posed forward, hand raised like a visionary. My sister, Charlotte, caught in a fabricated gust of wind, chin high, hair flowing, radiant. Me. A faint outline tucked into the background, half hidden by a column. No light touched me. It wasn't an accident. It was the message they'd been giving me my entire life. Stay small, stay silent, stay out of the way. Isn't it magnificent? My mother, Genevieve, said as she swept into the room. Her eyes lingered on Charlotte's figure, her smile tight but satisfied. Etienne captured our essence perfectly. Our essence, I repeated, staring at my diminished form. Don't be dramatic, Iris, she replied smoothly. We all have roles. Yours isn't in the spotlight. The words landed like they always did, gentle enough to sound reasonable, cruel enough to wound. I lifted my phone and snapped a photo of the statue. Proof. Evidence of what I had always known but never been able to show. What are you doing? Mother's voice sharpened, but before I could answer, I heard familiar footsteps echoing down the hall. Charlotte's. I followed the sound to her study. Her voice carried through the half-closed door, crisp and confident, speaking to someone on the phone. Yes, the magazine feature should focus on father and me. The readers don't care about Iris. She isn't part of the company's future. The words froze me in place. My suspicion, my unease, it was all true. They weren't just overlooking me. They were deliberately erasing me. Blood drained from my face. My hand trembled against the polished wood doorframe. For 33 years, I had told myself their blindness was unintentional, that someday they would see me. But hearing my sister declare it so casually shattered the illusion. I turned back toward the statue, the shadow version of myself cast forever in bronze. This time I didn't see weakness in that hidden figure. I saw a challenge. A reminder. If they wouldn't give me light, I would create my own. And tonight at the unveiling they would see me whether they wanted to or not. They seated me so far from the head of the table that the chandeliers looked like moons over another country. Linen stretched in a perfect runway from father and Charlotte down to my end, where the waiters paused as if the oxygen thinned here. Place cards spoke the truth no one would say aloud. Henri, Genevieve, Charlotte, and somewhere near the floral leftovers, Iris. Crystals sang. Cutlery flashed. Laughter rose around the center like steam around a geyser. I could hear my name in the distance sometimes, the way you hear your own voice underwater. Distorted, delayed, dismissible. Father tapped his glass. Even the air obeyed. Friends, partners, family, he began, smiling the smile that opens checkbooks. Tonight we honor continuity. The Moreau legacy does not merely endure, it evolves. He turned to Charlotte, placed his palm over her hand as a photographer leaned in. Effective immediately, Charlotte Moreau is Executive Vice President of Moreau Holdings. Applause detonated. I clapped too because muscle memory is its own kind of training. A waiter leaned in to refill my water and whispered, "Congratulations," without looking at me. It felt accurate. Mother rose with ceremony and reached into her clutch. The gold watch appeared, its face catching light like an obedient sun. I knew every notch on that watch. When I was 12, Grandmere tapped its glass and told me stories about the women who wore it. Leaders, not ornaments. She pressed my wrist and said one day. That day was apparently tonight, and the wrist wasn't mine. Mother fastened the watch on Charlotte's arm. For the one who carries us forward, she said, kissing Charlotte's hair. Flashbulbs popped. Someone at my end of the table coughed into a napkin to fill the silence that followed here in the provinces. Are you with the family? A man to my left asked suddenly. He had the soft look of a person who schedules other people's lunches. His place card read Thomas Elon Media. He smiled politely the way people smile at strangers on elevators. Or, with the staff? I met his curious, harmless eyes. I'm with the research, I said. Ah, he nodded, already turning away as if I had said I'm with the coat room. Of course. Charlotte stood, lifted her glass, delivered a careful paragraph about stewardship and vision. Words like momentum, horizon, community took their turns in her mouth. From a distance, Father glowed with approval. From here, I watched the gold watch settle on her skin as if it had been waiting. Dinner arrived in choreographed waves. Scallop, lamb, something green named in French to make it feel important. My cousin leaned over a centerpiece and said, "Remind me, are you doing dermatology or dentistry now?" I cut my lamb exactly in half and said, "Neither," in a tone that didn't invite follow-up. He nodded, content with the shape of an answer. Between courses, a man with a press badge drifted down the table, scanning place cards. He stopped at mine, blinked as if he had found an unmarked door. "Iris Moreau," he read. "Are you new to the family business?" Before I could answer, Charlotte's voice arrived from 3 chairs away, light and laughing. "She does some research," she said to him without looking at me. "It's very admirable." Admirable. Like charity. Like a child who plays quietly and doesn't interrupt. The man smiled, the conversation drifted back upstream and the current closed over me. Coffee. Dessert. Toasts. The usual choreography executed with usual grace. When the plates were cleared and the chairs scraped, Mother's hand found my elbow with a pressure that pretended to be affectionate. She steered me toward a corridor where the caterers had lined up with trays. A service alley that smelled faintly of citrus and steam. "You were quiet," she said. "You positioned me that way," I answered. Came out flat factual. "In the lab you don't apologize for data." Her smile remained but the edges sharpened. "Iris," she murmured, "let's not complicate a beautiful evening. The Foundation Board will meet next month. It would be such a shame if your lab's allocation faced reconsideration because you were emotional tonight." There was soft as velvet, sharp as a hook. I thought of payroll. I thought of reagents and patient travel vouchers and the battered hand of a woman with early-onset Parkinson's gripping mine after a consult. My throat tightened in the old way but something else rose with it, steadier. "I hear you," I said. It was both true and not. She patted my arm, satisfied with compliance she could mistake for consent, and floated back to the applause where the story was being written. I stayed in the corridor. A bus tub rattled by, piled with glasses threaded with lipstick. Etienne, the sculptor, stepped from a side door, still wearing his black apron over a crisp white shirt. He looked briefly surprised to find me alone. "Mademoiselle Moreau," he said, lowering his voice to the way people speak to paintings. "Hey, I." He gestured toward the hallway that led to the study. I nodded and we walked the quiet strip carpet to the door with the statue behind it. He closed us in and exhaled. "They named me in the program," he said with a half smile. "Artists like that. But sometimes we prefer to speak without microphones." I looked at the bronze figures. Father forward, Charlotte lit, me recessed. "Did they tell you to make me small?" I asked. "Or did you volunteer?" Etienne didn't flinch. He walked to the plinth and touched the edge with reverent fingertips. "They told me the story they wanted," he said carefully. "A father and his heir." He shifted, angled the spotlight by 2 degrees, and the faintest sheen lifted from my bronze cheek. "But it is not in me to carve a person weak. Even when asked." He pointed, subtle but there. The shape of my hand around the notebook. The firm set of my shoulders. The line of the jaw he'd refused to blur. I left strength where I could. Something loosened in my chest, a knot I'd stopped hoping would ever relax. "Thank you," I said. He hesitated, then added, "I also left space." "Space. For you to step into," he said simply, and then he left me with the statue and the idea that a stranger had seen what my family would not. Back in the hall, a quartet rehearsed a snatch of Vivaldi in the empty grand hall. Staff adjusted lighting bars. The event coordinator jogged past with a clipboard, muttering about sight lines and timing. I drifted to the edge of the room where the stage had been assembled for the unveiling. On the far wall, a massive velvet curtain hid the statue. Opposite it, a projection screen hung waiting, the same one we always used for shareholder decks no one read. A thought clicked into place. Simple. Risky. True. I pulled out my phone, opened a folder I'd been building for months. Images of plates and gels, a photo of Marta hugging her toddler on the clinic steps, a slide with 3 lines that changed a life. Not the proprietary details, that would come later properly, but the story of the work, the faces behind the numbers, What it means when you stop asking permission to exist. Footsteps approached. I locked the screen. It was Father, polishing his glasses with a square of linen the way he always did before performances. "There you are," he said. "Let's have fewer surprises tonight, He didn't wait for an answer. It was an old habit, issuing wishes as orders and hearing them as obedience. He replaced his glasses and squinted at the stage. "Make sure you're near Charlotte when we do family photos. Not too near, though. We need clean lines." "Clean lines," I echoed. He clapped my shoulder, friendly, proprietary, and strode away. The coordinator called for pre-ceremony photographs. Guests trickled in, carrying perfume and expectation. Charlotte materialized beside me, gold watch catching light. "Try to smile when they shoot close-ups," she said, eyes on her reflection in a dark window. "You know how your mouth," she mimed a tight line. "It reads, resistant." "I am," I said. She blinked, then laughed, assuming it was a joke. Cameras began to blink. The first poses were just family. Father center, mother half a step back, Charlotte forward and to the right. The photographer's hand shepherded bodies the way a conductor moves notes. "And you," he said to me, pleasant and efficient, "let's tuck you behind them." Perfect. I planted my feet where I was. "I'm comfortable here," I said. The photographer hesitated, surprised more by the extra seconds than the refusal. Father's smile didn't shift, but the corners hardened. Mother's pearls made the smallest clink. Charlotte exhaled toward her hair. "Fine," Father said lightly, compromising without yielding. "One this way, one as arranged." They took both. In the second shot, my shoulder vanished behind Father's suit. In the first, my face caught a sliver of light. After the photos, chatter swelled. The quartet lifted their bows. Someone announced that guests should move toward the grand hall. The unveiling was about to begin. The velvet curtain seemed to breathe. Mother brushed past me as she moved to the front. "Stand back when they pull the cord," she murmured. "Let the piece read clean." The piece. The narrative. The edit. I looked across the room at the projection screen, waiting, blank as a promise. Etienne's words touched my shoulder again. I left space. My thumb found the file on my phone. I caught the technician's eye at the console and nodded toward the screen. He frowned for a beat, then, perhaps reading the certainty in my face, gave me the smallest nod back. As the lights dimmed and the room quieted, I took a breath that didn't shake. If they insisted on writing me out of the story, I would write myself in where everyone could see. From the stage, Father lifted the microphone. "Tonight," he said, "we unveil a symbol of who we are." The velvet rope waited in his hand. The gold watch glinted on Charlotte's wrist like a seal. I slid my phone into my palm, ready. Back in the lab, the silence was different. Not the suffocating kind of the dining hall, but the living hum of machines and the whisper of pipettes. Here at least I knew the rules. Evidence matters, results matter, truth matters. That's why the annual Moreau Foundation report on my desk stung more than any careless remark at dinner. Dr. Keller slid it toward me, brow furrowed. "Iris," he said, tapping the page. "Your name isn't here. The Cellular Regeneration Project. It's all Charlotte's quotes, but you led the research. Without you, there would be no trial phase." I scanned the glossy spread. Photos of lab coats, charts I had built, sentences I had written. But no credit. No Iris. My fingerprints erased. My work repackaged as Charlotte's vision for innovation. "This isn't oversight," Keller said quietly. "This is policy." The word hit me like cold water. Policy. Deliberate. That night, I spread folders across my apartment floor like pieces of a crime scene. Old clippings, photos, emails. At first glance, they looked harmless. Family newsletters, press releases, gala brochures. But when I put them in order, a pattern glared back. A science fair win at 15, cropped so only Charlotte's smile made the page. My first research paper at 19, the quote attributed to the Moreau team. Never me. Every group photo. Me at the edge, easily trimmed. I was being written out inch by inch. As I traced the years, a knock startled me. When I opened the door, Lucille, my father's secretary of 20 years, stood there with a manila folder clutched like contraband. "Don't say where you got this," she whispered, pressing it into my hands. But I couldn't watch anymore. Inside, yellowed newspapers, award programs, certificates, every achievement my family had hidden. My name printed bold. And in the margins, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, Iris shows unusual insight. Breakthrough potential. My chest tightened. So he had seen me all along. The invisibility wasn't blindness, it was choice. Lucille touched my arm. He notices more than he admits. But he decided Charlotte would be the face. I thought you should know. Then she slipped away before I could thank her. I sat among the scattered evidence, the folder heavy in my lap. Recognition withheld by design. My entire life reduced to footnotes my family refused to read. For a long moment I felt both furious and hollow. But then another thought took root. If they had tried this hard to erase me, it meant I mattered more than they wanted to admit. The next morning at the lab, Dr. Keller burst in, eyes bright, a sealed envelope in his hand. Iris, he said, unable to keep the smile from his face. The European Research Council just approved your proposal. 10 million euros. Full independence. You don't need their foundation anymore. The envelope trembled in my grip. 10 million. My own funding. No strings attached. For the first time, I realized I could step out of their shadow and never go back. The room was built for spectacle. Pendant lights like quiet comets, a velvet curtain hiding the statue, a stage that made every sentence sound permanent. People arrived in waves. Investors, board members, journalists, the kind of friends who speak in toasts. A quartet tuned, cameras blinked, and the night began moving toward its moment. Mother found me near the ramp. Photos first, she said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from my sleeve. Stand a step behind Charlotte. Let the lines read clean. I've stood at the back my whole life, I answered. Not anymore. She didn't argue, she revoked. Don't be emotional. The foundation reviews allocations next month. That's not your lever anymore, I said quietly, and her eyes flicked to my face as if seeing something she hadn't ordered. The photographer staged us. Father center, Charlotte half a step ahead, mother diagonal. And you, he gestured, let's tuck you just. I'm good here, I said, holding ground. There was a beat of unfamiliar silence. He took the shot anyway. In the second frame I let him move me. In the first, a sliver of light found my face. The coordinator whispered into her headset, house lights eased, and father walked to the microphone wearing the smile that opens doors. Friends, partners, family, he began. Tonight, we unveil a symbol of who we are, a legacy cast in bronze. Applause. Charlotte stepped forward, wrist angled so the gold watch caught a photographer's flash. She spoke about stewardship and horizons. I watched the console at the back of the hall. The technician looked up. I met his eyes and nodded once. He hesitated, then let his hand rest on the switch. Charlotte's last sentence landed. Continuity isn't just a promise, it's our practice. And the room exhaled to receive the unveiling. Father reached for the velvet cord. The screen opposite the statue woke up. A single line appeared in white on black. We measure impact by what changes for people, not by who stands in the light. Iris Moreau. A murmur rolled across the room, small at first, then gathering like water. Before anyone could call it a mistake, the first image filled the screen. My team in the lab, not a posed shot, a working one. Gloves. Laughter. The kind of focus that turns hours into data. Then Marta on clinic steps, holding her daughter. The consent line blurred, her smile not. A graph. 3 lines bending apart where 2 months earlier they had only argued. Photos of plates, a clean gel, a single caption. Targeted misfolding inhibitors, phase 2. Someone in the second row lowered his phone slowly, as if he'd been recording out of habit and realized he was watching instead. Who authorized this? Mother breathed, moving toward the console. The technician didn't look at her. He was watching the room. I took the small remote from my pocket and advanced the slide. The ERC letter filled the screen, redacted where it should be, unmistakable where it mattered. European Research Council, Advanced Grant. Awarded, 10 million euros. Independent oversight. Below it, a date and the first line of the panel's notes. Potentially transformative approach in early-onset neurodegenerative disease. The air changed. Board members pivoted in their chairs. Journalists raised their cameras not toward the curtain but toward the screen and then toward me. Charlotte's smile stored itself, waiting for instructions. Father tried to pull the evening back to its rails. He stepped to the mic, voice velvet. Thank you for that preview from our research partners. Now, Mr. Moreau, a reporter called, not waiting. Is Moreau Holdings the primary funder of Ms. Moreau's work? I raised my own mic, steady finally. The project is fully funded by the European Research Council, I said. Independent. Peer-reviewed. We begin the expanded trial next quarter. Questions multiplied. What's the indication? How soon could this translate to pipeline? Will you be spinning up a separate institute? On screen. A short video. 2 hands, the same hands 1 month apart, writing a name, then writing it again without the tremor that used to split the letters. The room went quiet the way rooms do when they are forced to compare a speech with a life. Father left the mic and came to me, smile fixed for cameras, voice pitched for one person. We'll commission a statue for you, he said. A beautiful one. For the science wing. I don't need a statue to exist, I said. His fingers tightened just above my elbow, then loosened when he remembered where we were. Remember who holds your lease, he murmured. Read the letter, I replied softly. Then look around. Around us, investors were already replotting maps. A pharmaceutical VP I'd met twice asked a technical question about our misfolding assay that she would not waste on a photo op. A board member I barely knew said, if this scales, your division outvalues our consumer arm in 5 years. The words weren't flattery, they were arithmetic. On stage, the master of ceremonies, rattled but dutiful, tried to advance the program. If we could have everyone's attention for the unveiling. Father seized the cord and pulled. The velvet fell. Bronze gleamed. Cameras did what cameras do, they pointed where the story was, and most did not point at the statue. Charlotte stood beside the plinth, perfect as a catalog image, but the room's sightline had shifted by degrees that become miles. She watched it happen and understood before anyone admitted it. The air written in metal had been upstaged by a slide deck and a sentence that began with we instead of I. Mother reached the console and hissed, cut it. The technician folded his arms. The feed is locked, he said not unkindly. He was lying for me. Or for the part of himself that hates being told to make people disappear. Dr. Keller stepped to my side, not touching, present all the same. You did the right thing, he said, eyes still on the screen. Truth belongs in rooms like this. A journalist turned to me. Ms. Moreau, one question. Are you leaving Moreau Holdings to form an independent institute? I thought of my team at the lab, of Lucille's manila folder, of the bronze version of me holding a notebook because a sculptor refused to carve weakness. I thought of the watch on Charlotte's wrist and of my grandmother tapping glass and saying leaders, not ornaments. I'm not leaving anything, I said. I'm building something. Will it carry the Moreau name? Another asked. If it does, I said, it will be because of the work, not the surname. Beside the plinth, Father tried again to gather the evening. Friends, he said, smiling like a closed door, tonight is about legacy. That's exactly what I'm talking about, I answered and advanced to the final slide. An empty bench, a lab coat folded on a chair back, the caption open positions, applications Monday 9 a.m. An email address that was mine, not the family's. For a long beat the hall did not breathe. Then the sound returned, the good kind, not gossip. Pencils scratching, calendar alerts pinging, the low electric hum of plans being made. A donor I'd avoided for years leaned over the aisle and said, we should talk about endowing a fellowship. A reporter, still recording, mouthed wow without irony. Charlotte stepped close enough that her perfume reached me. Her voice, for the first time all evening, did not carry. Iris, she said, eyes not meeting mine, we need to talk. Tonight. It wasn't a command. It sounded like a request someone makes the first time they realize requests are options. I let the moment hang because I had learned the value of air. After I speak to my team, I said. And after I answer their questions. I nodded toward the investors now waiting to be introduced to my data instead of my pedigree. Father touched the mic again, but the hall did not tip toward him. It tipped decisively toward the screen. From the back, Etienne lifted his glass a fraction in my direction. He had said I left space. I had stepped into it. A notification vibrated against my palm. I glanced down, an email from the ERC program officer. Press notice approved for release at 8 o'clock. Congratulations, Dr. Moreau. I looked up at the bronze version of my family and at the room that had, in the space of a minute, chosen a different focal point. Ladies and gentlemen, the master of ceremonies said, finally surrendering to the story in the room, It seems we have 2 unveilings tonight. And somewhere behind the applause, real this time not choreographed, Father leaned toward me and said very quietly, "We're not done." "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "We're finally starting." 6 months later, the gala felt like a lifetime away. My days no longer began with anxious calls from the foundation or ended with veiled threats about funding. They began in sunlight, in a lab that hummed with possibility, in a building where my name was on the lease. The Iris Moreau Institute had opened its doors with 10 researchers, then 20, then 50. Investors who once toasted Charlotte at galas now sat across from me in conference rooms, asking about trial data and long-term vision. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving on the scraps of attention from my family's table. I was at my own table and it was full. The glass walls of the new facility looked out over the river. Every morning, lights spilled across workbenches and computer screens, and I remembered the bronze statue's shadows. Here nothing was hidden. Dr. Keller sometimes stood in the back of meetings, arms folded, smiling when my voice carried through a presentation without hesitation. "You've always had it," he told me once. "Now you're just using it." I hung no portraits in the main hall. Instead, we filled the space with photos of patients regaining strength, of trial participants holding their children, of my team celebrating milestones. These were our legacy, carved not in bronze but in lives changed. One evening, I received an invitation to Father's birthday celebration at the estate. Against my better judgment, I went. Not out of obligation but curiosity. The house looked the same, but I no longer did. I walked through the familiar hallways without the knot in my stomach. My heels clicked with confidence that once would have felt like arrogance. "Come join the family photo," Mother called as if no time had passed. The photographer lined us up the old way. Father center, Charlotte in front, Mother at his side. And Iris just a step back. I stopped moving. "Actually, I'm comfortable right here." The silence was sharp. Charlotte shifted, waiting for Father to correct me. But this time something different happened. Father adjusted his stance. Mother moved an inch to the left. The photographer recalibrated and the world did not end. For the first time, the picture was taken with me fully present. Not behind. Not erased. Equal. Afterward, at the dinner table, Father lifted his glass. "To the Moreau legacy," he said, the old script. Then his eyes flicked to me. "And to those who carry it forward in their own way." It wasn't a confession or an apology. But it was an acknowledgement, the first honest one in decades. Weeks later, I sat in a different studio. The artist asked where I wanted to be painted. I said, "In my lab." With my team in the background. The first strokes showed me at a desk, not overshadowed, not hidden, just myself. Strong, visible, undeniable. When the canvas dried, I hung it in the Institute's lobby. Not at the center, not larger than life, but as part of a wall filled with milestones. On a shelf nearby sat a miniature replica of the bronze statue from the gala. I kept it not as a reminder of my family's dismissal, but as proof that I had outgrown their shadow. Sometimes the fight isn't about forcing people to see you. Sometimes it's about building a life where you no longer need their vision at all. So I'll ask you, the ones listening now, would you keep struggling to be recognized by those who erased you? Or would you choose to build your own story where new eyes see your worth from the very start?